time, space, all that was, all that will be. It's not always as it seems. The history of the Hooniverse bends and twists into all sorts of shapes. It's easy for things to slip through the cracks. And so, join us as we delve into the chronological foam and explore the unresolved storylines of Doctor Who. Hello listeners! With the next season of Doctor Who approaching, I think it's worth taking a moment to look at the previous seasons of Doctor Who and question some of the less than resolved plot lines that never received a full conclusion, at least on screen. Therefore, we will be discussing one of the latest and most obvious unresolved storylines, Missy's survival on the Mondasian colony ship and her regeneration into the Spy Master. Without further ado, let's jump right in. So, for context, in the season 10 finale, The Doctor Falls, when the 12th Doctor and Missy found themselves on a Mondasian colony ship coming up against rapidly evolving Cybermen, Missy, who was roughly in the 5th incarnation of the Master's second regeneration cycle, came face to face with a previous incarnation, the Harold Saxon Master, who was supposedly her immediate predecessor. Not recalling the details of her regeneration from this previous incarnation into herself, Missy likely realised that she was in a continuity loop, and tricked her past self into getting into an elevator back to his TARDIS before literally stabbing him in the back to trigger his regeneration into her, telling him that it was time that they, meaning the Master, stood with the Doctor rather than against him. In retaliation, the Master shot her, too proud to ever let any future incarnation of himself stand with the Doctor. This was supposedly meant to be a final death for Missy. She got the full blast and shouldn't have been able to regenerate. And yet, in season 12, the 13th Doctor was shocked to discover that an old acquaintance of hers, codenamed O, was in fact the Master. So, this begs the question, how did Missy survive? Well, the first and most obvious explanation is that the Saxon Master was just lying when he shot Missy. This isn't exactly out of character for him, and while the comic story The Five Masters has demonstrated that different incarnations of the Master may be willing to compete with one another, it's unlikely that such an egocentric character such as the Master would go as far as to kill his future self. It could also be that it wasn't the blast from the laser screwdriver that was intended to kill Missy, but the Master dealt her a painful blow and told her that she was dying, hoping that by convincing her that she couldn't regenerate, it would prevent her from regenerating. We already know from sources such as Destiny of the Daleks and Let's Kill Hitler that psychological factors can influence regeneration, such as when Romana willingly cycled through multiple forms before settling on a final form for her second incarnation, and Mel's needed to concentrate to focus on a dress size when regenerating into her River Song incarnation. We also saw the Saxon Master refuse to regenerate in Last of the Time Lords, and the Doctor delay his first and 14th regenerations in Twice Upon a Time, which clearly indicates that a Time Lord's mental state does indeed have a strong impact on whether or not they regenerate. So perhaps it was just that. The Master was too proud to kill his own future self, and so he just decided to lie out of spite. However, that theory is made more complicated by the existence of the Lumiat. In the audio story The Lumiat, Missy, at a much earlier stage in her life prior to season 10, comes face to face with a time lady named the Lumiat, who reveals to Missy that she is the quote-unquote next incarnation of the Master after her, having avoided death through use of an Elysian field. An Elysian field is a piece of technology that grants a dying Time Lord a new regeneration cycle and a new body by burning up their existing body down to just the consciousness and its constituent atoms, while also reprogramming their personality to remove unwanted characteristics, and some of their past memories as a result, before their body is reformed. Comparing herself to something like the Valeyard, the Lumiat was also given a separate time stream from Missy, allowing her to interact with her own past and potentially even kill Missy without causing a paradox. The Lumiat, having been reborn as benevolent and kind, tried to foil some of Missy's previous evil deeds, but was eventually shot by her past self and abandoned on a random planet to regenerate, presumably into the Spy Master. This theory actually makes the most sense, as it can also provide an explanation as to why the Spy Master returned to Gallifrey, ultimately leading to his discovery of the Timeless Child and subsequent reignition of his fury towards the Doctor. Since the Lumiat had actually lost some of her memories from her previous lives as the Master, so perhaps the Spy Master went back to Gallifrey to access his old memories stored in the Matrix. Given how the story of the Lumiat ended and the airing of Spyfall shortly after its release, this theory wraps up Missy's survival story nicely. However, there is one more possible explanation for Missy's survival. What if the Spy Master was actually a previous incarnation relative to Missy? This theory is less supported by available evidence, but humour us for a minute because it is worth considering. It's widely accepted that Missy and the Spy Master come after the Saxon Master's incarnation, but neither the 12th or the 13th Doctor ever directly ask the Masters they encounter about when they come from in the Master's lifetime. They just assume that they encountered the Master in chronological order, despite Missy once saying to the Doctor that their whole life doesn't revolve around them, and in various audio stories, different versions of the Doctor have encountered different versions of the Master out of sync from their appearances on screen. So who's to say that the Spy Master actually came before Missy? Even Missy doesn't remember the specifics of her own regeneration, and many fans also pointed out that the Spy Master's descent into old habits seems like an enormous U-turn, and even with the explanation of the Lumiat and the Master potentially regaining lost memories from the Matrix, the Elysian field was still supposedly meant to remove the negative traits of the Master's personality. So there is still little reason for the Spy Master's return to villainy to such an extent, even after getting his memories back. So what if the Spy Master was in fact the incarnation that came directly after the Saxon Master, and his villainous persona was actually the persisting notion from his previous incarnation that he would never stand with the Doctor? From a character development perspective, it actually makes more sense, as the Spy Master exhibits an almost remorseful demeanour despite being jealous and spiteful, almost like he's slowly coming to the realisation that he doesn't hate the Doctor or even want to be the Doctor, he just wants to be close to them. Sacha Dhawan even said in an interview that if the Master could say anything to the Doctor, it would be, "I love you." And so, if the Spy Master came before Missy, what if Missy's realisation that she wanted her best friend back started with the Spy Master's incarnation? It's worth noting that the script for Lumiat was actually written about a year before Sacha Dhawan was announced as the next Master, so it is possible that Chris Chibnall didn't intend for the Spy Master's story to line up with the Lumiat story at all. The fact that it does was just a coincidence. This theory does raise questions as to how the Spy Master supposedly regenerated after his body was fatally damaged in Power of the Doctor. However, since a lot of regeneration energy was used in the plot of this episode, and he appears to have been preserved inside the Toymaker's gold tooth after losing to him, and the fact that the gold tooth was taken from UNIT after the Toymaker's defeat in 2023, I think it's fair to say that the Spy Master survived this ordeal too. So, which theory is correct? I think that the general trend of Masters and Doctors both appearing on screen together in the chronological order that the incarnations come in is likely to continue even into the newer era of Doctor Who. So even though it makes more sense to me that the Spy Master actually came before Missy, it's not unthinkable that the Lumiat regenerated into the Spy Master, and given how the audio stories typically tend to align a lot closer to the TV series these days compared to back in the Wilderness years before the 2005 revival, I think the most likely explanation is that Missy was the one who used an Elysian field to become the Lumiat, and the Lumiat then became the Spy Master. Truth be told, I do prefer the idea that the Spy Master came before Missy, as this would be a level of timey-wimey storytelling never used before in Doctor Who on screen. However, we will likely need to wait for the Master's teased return in the current iteration of the show before we know for certain. So, I put it to you listeners. Which theory do you think is most likely correct? Do you have any other theories? Did you notice something that we missed? Let us know in the comments section in your favourite streaming app, or you can head over to our social media pages on Instagram and TikTok at Tardisian Files Podcasts and put your thoughts in the comments section for the promo post for this episode. Thank you all for listening, and as always, see you next time on Tardisian Files.